Okay, I'm gonna upload this to YouTube just because I love showing like behind the scenes of stuff I do. I do quite a bit of it. But basically, I'm gonna rap my story. I'm gonna read my story rapping to a Juice WRLD instrumental, and then after, I'm gonna freestyle rap about the first chapter of my book because I got to do that for this assignment for school. Yo, Brian lay there the first night, dozing in and out of sleep, his mind drifting to memories of his family vacation to Mexico years back. Virgin pina coladas by the pool, all-you-can-eat buffet, little flea markets close by to blow his allowance on. Painful, he thought, before he finally conked out. This time, alone is going to be painful. Chirp, chirp, said the 4 a.m. bird. Brian woke up angry, then fell back asleep, only to wake up pleasantly surprised by the sun shining on his face. I feel bad for the pilot and his whole family. Matter of fact, I'm going to send up a quick prayer for him right now. Brian dipped his head in the morning glow, sitting with his back against a sturdy tree. Kind of hungry, he decided it was time to get up and have his pee and see what was salvageable among the wreckage. I need to get out of my comfort zone. A random feeling came over him, tailgating from stuff going on in his life in the city before the crash. With this shot of random energy and inspiration, he stripped down to his skivvies and hopped in the foggy water. Under he went. Even though he was unprepared for it, his thoughts weren't perfect so as to feel proper before taking the plunge, but he did it anyway. He blasted out of the water feeling incredibly refreshed and almost wanted to blurt out, "I'm doing something with my life!" All the while, his conscience was still reminding him that only 400 feet away is a deceased pilot sitting in the cockpit of a tattered bushcraft. As he began to swim, he felt quite confident and comfortable. By the way, being an avid fisherman on the little lakes like this back home, he noticed some sort of black cloud, no, a swarm, flying through the air, the opposite side of the plane. Please be honeybees, he thought as he feared a swarm of anything else. Slightly distracted, he kept pushing forth, pushing the water along his sides like a frog. Finally, like a man, he reached the plane. Brian couldn't deny this entrepreneurial feeling deep down during this situation. Imagine how much I could impress people with this story. Imagine the little life I can piece together for myself while I'm here. Almost feeling guilty for having such hero-like fantasies, he wasted no time on entering the plane and quickly noticed it was lodged into a deadhead in the water. A deadhead is a tree that's in the water, barely poking above the surface. Feeling insecure, he began investigating the plane. Life jackets floating in his face, some bottles. Aha, first aid kit. Brian announced as he saw it strapped to the back wall. Tools, 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 he said as he unstrapped the kit. He began pushing everything that floated to the far side of the plane, planning on making a little raft to float his treasures back to shore. He decided he was going to be very brave and forthcoming about handling the pilot's body. He wasted no time in getting up close and personal. Brian originally planned to pull the body out and bring him to shore for a proper burial, but something came over him. It was as if God was telling him to relax and just leave the pilot where he was. Besides, Brian, you don't want to attract predators with a deceased body. He clasped his hands together and said a quick blessing over the man and got back to work. He tied the life jackets together and began tying the first aid kit into a bunch when he had heard a loud bang. It was his head. He hit his head hard against the sheet metal. His forehead started bleeding, and ashamedly, his first thought was sharks, but quickly his rational brain clicked in and thought about stitches. The first aid kit actually had a little mirror in it, and after a quick inspection, he decided he wouldn't need stitches, but still had to bandage it up. He felt almost disturbing peace while in the midst of all this. Shouldn't I be all distraught and stressed out, he thought. Perhaps he was experiencing some piece of independence, having to survive out there on his own, without his parents or siblings. He kept his hands together around his face and dunked his head. The air trapped by his hands allowed him to make goggles so he could see underwater. Alas, he thought, he could see his bag lodged under the pilot's seat. After he grabbed his bag, he really calmed down and decided he was going to do a thorough search of the craft to get everything he could possibly fit onto the raft. He was calm and good at examining, but the bandaging on his forehead was causing water to leak into his hand goggles. He remembered at the instant the pilot telling him after this trip up north to Caspa Lake, he was going to head straight to Mexico to enjoy some world-class scuba diving. Brian felt exciting anxiety in this moment and looked feverishly for the pilot's bag. Sure enough, the pilot's bag was found near the very back of the plane, jammed up in the netting. This was going to take some breath to retrieve, but Brian was determined. He very calmly took a deep breath and went under, then swam down the broken half of the plane. A little rush of adrenaline hit him when he struggled to get the bag free, but he did it with ease and swam back up and grabbed onto his raft, standing on one of the seats. He searched the bag feverishly and didn't find just goggles, but a snorkel too. This will come in handy. His raft was at maximum capacity with 2 bags, so he decided he'd take the long swim home. At this point, he was now cold. His feet were starting to go numb, and he pushed on, like a frog, but this time with a raft. Magic flooded Brian's brain as he walked up to the remarkably nice beach. Look at the tree where he spent the night. Imagine if they found me as a spearfishing alpha caveman. Imagine how cool I would look. More thoughts that Brian considered intrusive because of how silly they were. Brian smiled though. At least I have an imagination, he thought. Brian knew if there was anywhere near Caspa, he had to be vigilant of black bears. I'll start a fire. Maybe the smoke will keep them away. The first aid kit actually was well equipped with survival amenities. Pain starting to grow in Brian's heart, like the type of pain he thought of before he fell asleep last night. 50% of every day is pain. I've known this for a while, he thought as he sat there. The magic Brian was feeling started to fade. He started to feel pain. Then suddenly a bee stung him right on the butt. Ow! He exclaimed, getting up off the life jacket raft, jumping and prancing around like a Keebler elf, and grasping his buttocks and nodding his head in pain. Now this is real pain. He couldn't help but think it as enduring his terrible experience. I forgot about the bees, he thought, as they brought him a sense of magic back to his situation. Bees, at least now I know there for sure is honey. Honey, he thought, as he thought to himself in Homer Simpson voice. Starting to get hungry now, he dug deeper into the survival pack to find a flint block, now to gather firewood. Tough times don't last, tough people do, he said to himself while he duct taped a knife onto the end of a stick. Time to gather wood. It was situated on a little peninsula that allowed wood to be pushed onto shore. Much of it wet, he lugged it over to his beach site. His teenage mind quickly fantasized about having a bikini beach party where he was the center of attention, but this fantasy faded as his butt started to hurt again. He limped around in the 400-meter radius of his site, grabbing every bit of wood that he could. Centered, he said aloud. I need to be centered. Perhaps I should focus on being the most centered person by the exact middle of the rest of my life. Now, feeling centered, Brian could not help but think about food. He wished it was very easy to spearfish, but he knew it was going to be a daunting task. At this point, he realized how incredibly thirsty he was. He was tempted to drink straight from the lake, but he was paranoid, so he grabbed a pot from his bag, filled it with water, decided it was time to start a fire. The flint was hard to use, but he got the fire started. He boiled the water and drank it. He didn't like how the water was, but he focused on the health benefits of simply consuming water. Brian enjoyed every last bite of the fish. He did crave some fresh cut fries though, fried right in the pan of oil on the fire. Come to think of it, I wouldn't mind some mushrooms and onions sauteed in a pot and a can of corn cooked right on the fire. He ate the entire fish and didn't feel bad about it, knowing full well these lakes were chock full of pike and even bass and trout. So long as I don't break my fishing rod, he thought. He decided he was going to add walking into his daily routine, pacing even, planning lots of things even though he was still on his first day there. I need to build a shelter now. This is serious, he said to himself. He grabbed every big chunk of driftwood off the beach that he could and began snagging pine boughs off the back spruce all around him. He worked up a sweat in the summer heat and had to dunk his head a few times. While he was dunking his head, he looked up over his shoulder and noticed something. A plane, way up there. He smirked and thought, I wonder if they're going to Mexico. Knowing full well it would be pointless to try and contact a plane that high with a smoke signal, a whiskey jack followed him into the water. He began bathing next to Brian. Friendly little guy, a beautiful specimen. Brian named him Whiskers, knowing full well he could confuse him with another jack. Whiskers was an offspring of 4, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. All lived within a 30-kilometer radius, not the type to meet up for family dinners. Brian wondered how often he was having dinner with his siblings once, if he ever got back to them. They fought a lot. But they did manage to keep their father's business afloat. Brian was only 18, remember. He had dreams of moving away, to escape the drama and start his own happy life. He sat there on his knees and took advantage of it by sending up a prayer. Lord, thank you for what you're doing for myself and my family right now. He got up and sauntered back to his building materials, Whiskers following. Okay, let's build a house. It took him 4 hours before he was somewhat satisfied with his house. He had a front entrance, but he also had a rear escape. Not taking any risk with bears up here, he thought. It was 4 p.m. now, and Brian was hungry again. He decided he would cook an emergency ration from the survival kit. As soon as he started cooking, he felt guilty. I should have saved this for a rainy day. But alas, he pushed forth and ate the delicious pad thai, full of salt. He boiled more water and stored it in a bottle from the wreck. He got up and started doing his pacing. If I pace for 3.5 hours, that will bring me to 7. The sun rises about 4:30 a.m., so if I go to bed at 7, that's a 9.5 hour sleep. He paced for about 45 minutes, practicing in his head what he was going to say at his grandiose presentation about how he survived in the Saskatchewan wilderness. He also practiced a little bit of preaching, which kept his spirits high. He got enticed and interested by the tadpoles all bunched up on the peninsula shore. Yum, he thought. That's going to be a lot of frogs. Already thinking and speaking like a caveman. He stood there in admiration. He heard a scary sound. It was a thump, 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 thumping, until it sounded like someone on a snare drum in a marching band. He couldn't wrap his head around what was making that noise, but his best guess was that it was a rabbit thumping its feet on the edge of its hole. He walked towards the sound, making sure he knew which way it was coming from, keeping the lake in his sight. He could feel himself getting closer. This is awesome. There seems to be a lot of food. Just as he said this out loud, he got the fright of his life. A complete commotion erupted right in front of him, knocking him to the ground. Then he realized the commotion was fluttering, flapping wings on a spruce grouse. Filled with adrenaline, he stood up and looked for a rock. He grabbed 3 perfect stones and lasered in on the chicken's head. He missed, then missed again, then really focused and hit the grouse. A perfect hit to the head left the grouse unconscious. Brian ran up and gave thanks to God as he dropped a big rock on the poor specimen's head. Holy, I guess I'm eating even more tonight. He stood up. He stood on the thing's wings and pulled up until he saw the head dislocate. Then he ripped open the chest skin to expose the breast. Then pulling the head backwards or forwards while he gripped the breast so the entire spine and entrails would fall off in one swift but steady pull. He decided he was definitely going to eat the heart, liver, and gizzard. He decided to be different. He was going to boil the meat and drink the water like a soup. Okay. That's the first chapter.